G'day Bomber fans, it is trade update time. There is lots going on. Our biggest target is off the market. Some of our own players are being linked with moves away. Draft rules are changing the way we look at this year's trade period. There's heaps to discuss. Maybe a longer video today, but we roll with it. Let me know down below what trade or draft content you want to see. I love posting about it. Let's get into this video though. As always, we start by discussing our own players. We'll start with Elijah Sartas. He signed an extension with us at the start of the year. He was on our books till 2026. Cal Toomey about 2 or 3 weeks ago flagged the idea of clubs asking the question about him. He's a top 5 pick, not playing senior footy in his second year at the club. He's playing really well in the reserves as well. Jay Clark recently came out on the Herald Sun and said that Richmond could be showing interest in Sartas this year, as they have a host of players potentially out the door with Rioli, Baker, even maybe Dusty Martin seeking moves. So they would be after young talent for the future and will have the draft capital to get these trades done. And Essendon are looking for more draft capital themselves, so we can attack the open draft while also matching a bid on our academy prospect Isaac Kako. But I really do doubt the Bombers are enticed to trade away a top 5 pick in his second year. I know that some think this draft decision was a bust, but the kid is being played out of position in the AFL when he does play. He dominates the VFL in his preferred position as that inside midfielder. Once he builds muscle, I can see him being a player. It's why we extended his contract for not 1 but 2 extra years. The fact he is contracted could make it tough for Richmond, but I can see why Sartas would maybe want a fresh start somewhere else. He could be getting game time at a team like Richmond. There is now renewed interest in midfielder Dylan Shiel. Mitch Cleary came out last week and said the Saints would come again for Shiel after missing out on him in the 2023 trade period. He's not out of contract, so a deal would have to be struck, and Jay Clark has added to this saying that the Saints had actually met with Shiel at some stage, so the interest could be real, and Shiel could definitely seek a trade. 3 games this year, he's played fairly well since coming back into the side, but he'd definitely be worried about being squeezed back out into that VFL after a bad game or two. Our midfield isn't amazing, but it's deep, and Shiel has fallen down the pecking order in it. The real issue is Shiel is contracted, so a trade would have to be agreed upon, and we are typically a very hard team to trade with, but I have no doubts that if the Dons were keen on moving him off our books, because he would be on extra money right now, we could get it done. This could be a really handy move for the club if we were wanting that extra bit of draft capital for our academy bid. Nick Bryan, now this in many ways is the most intriguing of the Bombers who could seek a move away. Fans would be outraged to see him in different colours. He's played 1 AFL game this year after playing 8 last year. He's getting better, he's getting more mature, he's getting bigger, but he's playing less AFL footy. He could definitely be playing more footy at a club like Melbourne or even Adelaide, who are looking at life after O'Brien. Any club with ruck depth worse than ours, because right now Bryan is stuck behind Draper and Goldstein. And the issue for Bryan, who probably wants to move, is that he is contracted until next year, and the Bombers will undoubtedly ask for a pretty high price as well. He's a second round draft pick, still developing. It would be at least a second round pick again, I reckon, probably higher with Essendon. Really, it's on the club here. Teams will want Bryan. Bryan will surely want to move, but Essendon could hold Bryan to his contract, which runs out in 2025. Or do they listen to offers? It also depends on what happens with Goldstein. I'm sure Bryan would be happier to stay if Goldie was to retire, but would the club then try and find another mature AFL-ready ruck for depth from somewhere else because of Draper's inconsistency with his body? There's a lot to play out here. Jake Stringer is yet to sign on at Essendon. It has many talking about him being potentially gettable, but I doubt it. I think he's staying. It would be pretty wild for him to either retire or seek a fresh start this late. I think the club and Stringer are probably just trying to figure out how long his next contract is. He's out of form a bit right now, so it's probably only going to be 1 or 2 years at most. I think I've seen some link him to Melbourne, but I reckon that's just for clicks. Stringer is likely to stay put with Essendon for the 2025 season. The Gettable podcast gave us a little look into 2025. They said that the Adelaide Crows, who are in need of some ruck stability, would go very, very hard at Sam Draper next year, try and lure him home while he is out of contract. Draper is originally from South Australia. Draper himself was asked about this supposed interest and shut it down pretty quickly though, and I'm sure the club would try and extend his contract early into the season next year or even some stage this year, just to avoid any unwanted stress and the potential of a move away. Onto the guys outside the club who we are linked with or have been linked with, and I say have been here because Ben Ainsworth is no longer available. Our main target for the 2024 trade period has signed on at Gold Coast, surprising many with the decision considering he is a Victorian. He signed a 4-year deal, I believe with a clause for a 5th according to Cal Toomey. It's a great get for Gold Coast, who have historically struggled to keep interstate players at the club, but I guess the culture is improving over there. First Ben King, now Ben Ainsworth. We used to look at Gold Coast targets as sure things, now they are anything but. So this is the last time Ben Ainsworth will feature in these videos for the next 4 years at least. Alright, with Ainsworth off the market, attention now turns to the next free agent we can try and bring into into the club, and the logical choice now is Cam Zurhaar. We've been linked with him before. He would be teaming up with North teammates. He could have the baton passed to him by Jake Stringer, who's struggling right now. I do feel like Zurhaar would be a good fit at Essendon. The issue is he's looking likely to stay put at North. Tom Morris has come out in the last fortnight and said that Zurhaar is more likely than not to sign that 5-year contract that was put on the table in front of him at the start of the year. He has held off on contract talks all season. It's going late into the year, but it's looking like he will stay put. I'm sure the club will ask the question, Essendon, offer the big bucks, which may not be deserved, but we'll see. There could be a lot of room in the salary cap with players potentially leaving anyway. Shield would free up room for Zurhaar, I would say, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's right to pay overs for a forward who has yet to really prove himself as a player who deserves those big bucks. I think he stays at North. There are some plan B options as well for forwards now that Ainsworth signed on. Joe Richards from Collingwood has been labelled as a player that clubs have been watching. He's been a fringe member at Collingwood, playing recently due to injuries, but it's a tough place to be if you're a small forward. We saw with Ginnivan last year, who was pushed out. They have quite a few over there. He's a mature ager as well, so although new to the system, is still 24. The more he plays, though, the more likely it is for him to stay. He made his debut in round 10 and has played most games since. We'll see how the year ends, though. If he loses his spot, he could well look elsewhere. I don't know if the attention will turn here, though, if we're getting a player like Isaac Kako in the draft, potentially. A small forward that is still wildly uncontracted and unsigned, despite playing some really good footy this year, is Carlton Livewire Matt Owies. Now, he will undoubtedly want to stay. Surely he'll want to stay. Putting money and security aside, you'd rather be at Carlton right now over Essendon. That isn't controversial to say. But the longer he is made to wait for a deal, the more likely it is for clubs to come asking the question. Other clubs will surely be prepared to offer more money, more security. He would have been signed up in January if he was at Essendon. He would easily be our best small forward right now. He's kicked more goals than any of our smalls. I'm sure if he is not signed up by the end of the year, by the end of the season, we will ask the question. We'd be silly not to, but Owies is apparently content over at Carlton, and no one there is worried about any uncertainty. The last small forward to talk about is Liam Ryan. This is a guy that Cal Toomey brought up on the most recent episode of Gettable. He has another 2 years to run his contract after the season ends, but there is some uncertainty around him and his future at West Coast, so a trade would have to be struck. Now, Ryan, obviously, at his best, is a gem of a player to watch. I remember him tearing up against us back in 2021. I think he kicked 4 or 5. He's actually kicked more goals against us than all teams bar one, but he hasn't really been that active lately. His body's let him down. Other things have let him down. He's not getting younger. He's turning 28. I know that Toomey knows more than us, but I doubt we would be keen as a fan base on Liam Ryan joining the club. That is unless he was really considered fit or the deal was basement level cheap, which I don't think it would be, so I don't see this one going ahead. Alright, on to a teammate of Liam Ryan's, Harley Reid. He's a bit of an unknown player. Not too many know about this guy. We were linked to Harley Reid a few months back. I never really brought it. It was more of a future link than a current link. The most recent piece of news was that clubs are willing to offer Reid obscene amounts of money when he was available, but again, that's not in 2024 and it's not really news anyway. West Coast aren't going to listen to any trade talks with Reid. They'll shut everything down until he's out of contract, I reckon. This is the type of player you should always try and keep before anything else. I've seen some suggest we should offer up certain players and high picks for Reid. The Eagles weren't willing to let go of pick 1 last year when North offered 4 first-round selections. They will never listen to a deal for Reid. Clubs would have to pay well and truly overs to get him, which would just not be a good idea for a player this young. So Reid is without a shadow of a doubt, not joining Essendon in 2024 or 2025. Harry Perryman, this one continues to be interesting. I honestly wouldn't mind us going hard for a guy like this instead of that end product player in the forward line. More class in defence could free up Martin to play back on that wing and use his foot skills up the field. The issue is there is a genuine bidding war going on for Perryman. Port are going hard, the Hawks are there, we're keen. The Giants know these clubs are keen and have upped their offer for Perryman from a 5-year deal to a 6-year deal. We are 4th in line for Perryman, it seems. Any news relating to the Giants seems to be involving Port and his current club, with Hawthorn mentioned and us well and truly in the passenger seat. Another halfback that has a trade watch put on him is All-Australian Port defender Dan Houston. Victorian clubs are apparently keeping an eye on him. It's not yet known who, although the Melbourne Demons were specifically named. I would say, though, if we are keen on Perryman, we would probably at least think about the idea of bringing Houston to the club, but I don't know how we could ever get a trade done while building draft capital for a matched academy bid. Any other year, I'd say yes, but Houston would at the very least cost a first round pick. It would be more likely a first plus a second or third as well, and that's been generous. It would be very hard for a team like Essendon to make a trade for Houston while keeping the draft capital for that Kako bid, which I'll talk about later. Alrighty, and to finish the players, a discount option if we did want defensive coverage, because right now the depth we have on ground level in the back line is very young. Ben Patton from St Kilda. This was a guy who showed lots of promise early into his career, and it actually had us linked with him at one stage. We were keen on bringing him across a few years back around the same time that Saad was on the way out. He stayed put and ended up suffering a horrible injury which really impacted his career. He's been in and out of the St Kilda team since. His future is uncertain. He is a cheap, probably available player who never really lived up to his potential. We were keen on him in the past under Dodoro. I'm sure Dodoro has his name on a whiteboard somewhere trying to convince Matt Rosa to give a look at him. Alright, and finally, pick 11. It's what we currently have in the draft. This is going to be on the table. We will be listening to offers for this pick, not just because we could now have access to Isaac Kako in the draft. We would need capital to match a bid when it comes, but because this is a very even draft pool from about the pick 8 to 25 range, it's really hard to split. And even after them, there is some serious talent. It's not a super draft with stars in the early picks, but it is one of the deepest drafts in a long time, so we will surely be looking at ways to attack it the best way. We could either keep pick 11 to get a pick in before Kako, or trade it away for multiple picks further down the line to get more out of the deep draft that this promises to be, or we make that pick 11 and bring it inside the top 10 by trading up for it. Whatever it is, it's looking like we will at least be in discussions about splitting this pick or improving it. The higher it gets with our failing ladder position, the more likely it is for us to be active with it. That is that. Quick little trade update. There's a bit going on, set to be much more when the season ends. Going to be a fun off season. Let me know what you think down below. Who would you like to see in the red and black in 2025? That is all. Like, subscribe, and go Bombers.